I'm Leslie Hall.
And I'm Andy Rumi.
I can't believe we did that with
I
a straight
know, I
face.
know, I know.
Hello, everyone. I'm Felicia Winston,
And I'm John Dowl.
and you're tuned in to Listen Up a Minute. John, tell the people what Listen Up a Minute is all about.
This is just going to be one hot talk show. We're going to be talking politics, sports, fashion, current events, you name it.
No topic is off the table for us to discuss, and we will do it with passion and with drive. So, who's our special guest tonight, John?
Speaking of passion, this gentleman is the founder of the 804 Music Group, an internationally recognized music producer. However, he is very passionate about politics, and he's a historian as well. His name is Bill McGee.
That's right, y'all. Stay tuned in. Bill McGee is going to bring the real about politics from history up until current events and why you need to get out and vote. Stay tuned for Listen Up a Minute. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Listen Up a Minute. We are here with Bill McGee. He is a legend in the music industry. Bill, your career spans for 48 years. You have worked with Patti LaBelle, D'Angelo, Lou Rawls, Mad Skills. Aaliyah. That's just to name a few people that you've worked with. But tonight we're not here to talk about Bill's wealth of career in the music industry. We're here to talk politics.
Politics, that's right.
So, I gave a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, you left out one particular group that I work with. Is a group called Trussell.
Okay.
And we put that group together at Virginia State University back in 1973. And that was the springboard for a lot of those things that I did with Evelyn Champagne King and moving on to the Sugar Hill Gang and Grandmaster Flash and all those other people I've worked with. It all started with Trussell. So I didn't want to leave that part out.
Oh, absolutely.
All right? But I grew up in Atlanta. I grew up in Atlanta. My family lived in Petersburg. I had a rich family history in Petersburg. But my mother was a college professor and moved to Atlanta to take a job at Morris Brown College. That put me in a situation that changed my life because that was 1963. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the history of Black America starting in 1963, Atlanta was the Mecca. And we got a chance to attend Ebenezer Baptist Church many times to hear Dr. King speak. Mm. Before Selma, before all of those things. So I was indoctrinated as a child in the civil rights movement. Not only that, but I went to the same high school that Martin Luther King graduated from.
Oh, wow.
I went to elementary school with the King children. So I used to see either Reverend King or Mrs. King pick up Yolanda and Martin every day. This is before President Kennedy got killed. Show you where we are time-wise. So in 1968, I was a junior in high school at the same school Martin Luther King went to, and that's when he was assassinated. Mm. So you know what the feeling was in those hallways that he walked as a student. So my life, the one of the classes I got an A in other than music was government.
Okay.
And I was selected to be the representative for the Atlanta Youth Congress from my high school. I was nominated as president of the Atlanta Youth Congress, but I declined because music was still my thing.
Okay.
But the guy who became president, a young man named Michael Hollis, nominated me or appointed me to be the youth member for the Community Relations Commission in Atlanta. Maynard Jackson was one of the members of that commission. Reverend Samuel Williams was the chair. He taught Martin Luther King philosophy. And I got to sit next to Reverend Williams at 16 and 17 years old. And I remember one incident where we were talking about the police in the community that I lived in, and the police chief was there. And he said something about they had patrols coming into that community called Cascade. At the time, it had just turned predominantly black, and we didn't see any police out there. So the police chief at the time said, well, we have police. I said, that's a lie. We don't see any police out there. And I was 16 or 17 years old. Reverend Williams kicked me under the table. So my lessons in politics were actually, I just grew up in the civil rights movement. And I participated with Reverend Hosea Williams in some boycotts of some of the Sears stores and other things. So I get it natural. And I understood at the time something that I talk about, and that's what's going to segue us into this, which is I saw porch sitters. Mm-hmm. I saw porch sitters. I saw people. When we were boycotting and picketing and walking down the street, there were people sitting on the porch saying, I ain't getting involved in none of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And you say to yourself, but we're doing this for you and for us. And so what is the reason for porch sitting? That's what we got going on right now. Mm-hmm. When you look at the data and the statistics that we're talking about who didn't vote in 2014 mm-hmm. and who didn't vote in 2016, we're talking about porch sitters. Okay, so my whole thing is trying to encourage people to understand, wake up, as the saying is, get woke. Understand that we wouldn't have the president we have now if people hadn't been sitting on the porch. Mm. You know the data from 2014. One chart says 38.5% of the people didn't, only 38.5% of the people voted. Another chart says 41%. But still, 41% of eligible voters in 2014 is why we got what we got now. The same thing happened, or worse, in 2016. And so my whole thing is people need to wake up. They really need to wake up. Young people, people who are indifferent, that don't listen to the news. There's so much statistics, or so many statistics that tell you if you don't wake up, things are going to happen to you that you don't have any control over, and then you're going to wonder why. So that's where we are at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, Bill, and I thank you for giving us that history, the background, mm-hmm. and what you actually saw coming up, making reference to the porch sitters. Why do you think people don't get out to vote? I mean, of course, it's not 1960 anymore. A lot of the intimidation and things like that they had back in those times to keep people from the polls, I think it's still here today. It's kind of changed its face a little bit with policies and guidelines and things like that. But other than that, why do you think people don't get out to vote?
There's a history of being misinformed and uninformed. And we had porch sitters back then, people who really needed to be participating. Many of them didn't attend churches. Many of them were kind of like living in their own little life. And now it is, you've got so many distractions and so many channels on cable. If you don't want to watch the news, you never have to watch the news a day in your life. There's always something you don't even have to be informed if you don't want to be informed. You can just be uninformed, misinformed, not informed, and just live your life like that. So it's important with actions like what this Get Out to Vote whole program and Listen Up and everything. It's important that people listen and understand. My only concern is the people who a lot of times listen to what we're talking about are already awake. Mm-hmm. How do we get to those people? The crux of the matter is, how do we get to those people who don't understand how important it is to get out and vote right now. They got to show up. They got to register first. They got to show up, and then they got to vote. And that's just so important right now. I mean, I am passionate. I've spent the last year and a half, after I saw the statistics of how Donald Trump won. Donald Trump won the Electoral College by 148,000 people. That's it. 3 states. 149,000 people voted for Hillary in just 3 states. He would not have been president. All right. As you know, and the statistics tell you this, is 168 million people did not vote for Donald Trump. Only 63 million people voted for him. 65 million people voted for Hillary Clinton. And 93 to 102 million didn't vote at all. My data says it was 93 million people that didn't vote. That's more people than voted for him or Hillary. So not vote at all won the presidency.
Okay. So you mentioned that people are not, informed because they're not watching the news. But statistics show that there are some people who are very much informed, but because they don't agree with the candidates, they decide not to pick anyone. What do you think about that?
That may be true too. And I actually don't give Hillary a pass on the politics of what happened with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I don't give her a pass on that. But what I understand and what everybody else has to understand, I talked about the Supreme Court nominations, and I talked about Plessy versus Ferguson, and I talk about what happens when you lose the Supreme Court majority or you lose the balance. And that's where we are now. That's why I've been, since Justice Kennedy decided he was going to retire, I almost checked out on TV news and everything, because I've been telling people for a year, you vote, telling those same people who didn't necessarily want to vote for Hillary, you vote to protect the Supreme Court. If you look at the Supreme Court, I posted these. If you look at the Supreme Court decisions, like Plessy versus Ferguson and like the Brown versus the Board of Education, you realize, that people have to vote to protect the court.
Right.
That's the bottom line. You vote. The president's only there for 8 years. The Supreme Court nominations or the Supreme Court justices are lifetime appointments. And not only are they lifetime appointments, but what they do can last 100 years. Mm-hmm, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
If you're on the court for 30 years, what you can do can last for 100 years. Plessy versus Ferguson, which kicked in Jim Crow era, lasted no less than 70 years before the Civil Rights Act and other things turned some of that around. So when you don't vote, you're setting us up to get a majority Supreme Court. Right now, we're looking at a 5-4 conservative majority on the court if Kavanaugh is confirmed.
I tell you what, let's hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We want to talk about that. And then I want to talk about something that's very important that's coming up, is the midterm election. I'm going to let John talk with you about that when we come back. Stay tuned. Listen up a minute. We'll be right back.
Listen up a minute. Antoine Scott here to tell you one thing. Get out and vote. If you don't, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look at you. So many have came before you that have died trying to get the right to vote, and here you have it and you not utilizing it. What is your problem? I'm going to sit here and look at you. If you don't get out here and vote, I'm voting. Why you ain't voting? Don't get me mad. I'm here to tell you one thing, people. Utilize the right that you have, and that's the right to vote. Get out here and make a difference. Boy, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to look. I'm talking to you. I'm talking directly. I'm looking in your face right now if you ain't getting out here to vote. Please, people, utilize the right that you have. Lester, get over here and get me the people of the right of the Ancestry.com on the phone. Look here. I'm depending on you. You hear me? I'm dependent on you to get out here and vote. We are all waiting on you so you can have your sticker on your shirt.
We're back. She's Felicia Winston. I'm John Dowl, and we're here with Bill McGee, and we're going to continue our discussion. Mr. McGee, want to bring it home because people say all politics are local, and a lot of people don't realize that. You talked about the Supreme Court, and that's a national level, but at the local level, people don't realize how prosecutors affect our lives and how much power they have.
Absolutely.
And they are elected. They are elected by us. Can you elaborate on that?
It's the same scenario when you sit out and you are not counted. You don't have a voice, and that's the same thing whether it be county officials or whether it be state senators, whether it be legislators, representatives. You have to get involved. Just the other day, I saw that Tim Kaine was going to be with Abigail Spanberger speaking out at John Tyler Community College. I got up, put on some fancy clothes, and I went there. I signed up on Facebook that I was going to attend, and I went there, and I had to listen to what it said. It was about the Veterans Affairs, and they actually were interviewing two African-American women who were veterans. One lady, both of them had been in the service for 29 years. One of them had been in the Air Force, one of them, and they were talking about veterans issues, and it wasn't necessarily germane to me. I'm not a veteran, but I went to support, and I also wanted to meet Abigail Spanberger because she is running up against David Bratt. Now, a lot of people going like, well, I never heard of this lady. I don't know her. I see a picture. She's blonde. She's whatever. She's not from this area. I don't care. I understand who David Bratt is. You see what I'm saying? David Bratt was more conservative than Eric Cantor. Now, if anybody knows anything about Eric Cantor and what he was doing in the legislature, in the House of Representatives, and you find somebody who beat him, not because he was more conservative. So David Bratt is a member of the House of Representatives that represents the 7th District of Virginia, which is up near Ashton, and it comes all the way down into North Chesterfield. I just happen to live in the Chesterfield. So my thing is, okay, whoever's running against David Bratt, I'm for them because I know his politics. And so I started looking into Abigail Spanberger, and she's a former CIA agent. She's a Girl Scout leader. She's a mother. She has all the right ideas. I wanted to go hear for myself. So I went to hear her, and I already had met Tim Kaine years ago, but I also got a chance to meet him. And while I was there, I told Tim Kaine, the Music Modernization Act just passed the Senate, and that's a bill that fixes royalty rates in the streaming era now. Just because I'll throw it back to music because that's my thing. If I stream on Pandora or Spotify 100 of my songs, if 100 people listen to my song, I've been getting 2 pennies. 2 pennies.
Oh, wow.
In royalties. Versus if 100 people were to go out and buy my song, I'd get $79 because I get about 75% of the royalties when somebody will go out and buy my song. So it's a big difference between $79 and 2 pennies. The Music Modernization Act that they just passed is going to change all of that, because it's going to make people who stream music pay more royalties. It's also going to make sure artists from the past get paid royalties for what they've done. But guess what? I know this. And I talked to Senator Tim Kaine, and I told him, thank you for passing that. You know what he did? He asked me, he said, why is that important to you? And I just told him what I told you. I said, because if I if I stream 100 songs out on the internet, I get 2 pennies. You know, now with all the streaming services and everything else like that, musicians and artists are dying because you're not getting any money. If nobody's going to buy it and they're just going to stream it, you're not going to make any money. So relating what you do to politics is everybody can do that. If you work for the city, you can relate the politics to local issues. If you work for the state, you can relate politics to the local issues. getting involved. People need to wake up and understand that the people who represent them in state, local, federal elections are representing their causes, their issues. Social Security is important for older people. Voting rights is important for people. I'm just so happy to see the young people down in Florida who are trying to motivate young people so that they can get out here and get some things passed about gun control. You see what I'm saying? Because it's like
That's a major topic. I mean, it's been a major topic for a while in the black community, but now because of the mass shootings, of course, now it has national attention. Talk a little bit about that for us, Bill.
Well, it's young people doing that. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I'm encouraging kids who are 18 and older. African American people have known this for years. We need gun control. We need a whole lot of things going on. But assault weapons and AR-15s and everything else like that, they've affected, in Parkland, Florida, that's a suburban community. Those kids will tell you right now, they are wealthy young people. They'll tell you that. They were shocked when they realized that they talked to their representatives about getting the NRA to come with them, and the representatives shut them off. And I've heard people call them all kind of names. And these are young people who had friends of theirs killed right beside them. And then the people who are elected won't even listen to them. Those kids are angry. And I'm thinking that's going to help, because when you look at the women who are motivated, and 11 women are running for governors around the country. 11 women. Florida is something you need to look at. Florida is something you need to look at. Georgia with Stacey Abrams, something you need to look at. If people in Georgia turn out, and I hope my friends in Georgia turn out, they could make history. I always tell people, this is Virginia. We are the capital of the Confederacy, yet we elected the first black governor in history. Do you know right now in Virginia, all 5 statewide offices are filled by Democrats? Why? Because we have a coalition of women, young people, black people, people who work for the government. They get up and vote. Chesterfield, for the first time in 25 years, voted Democrat. For the first time in 25 years, Chesterfield voted Democrat. So right now, we really need people to get up, register. In Virginia, it's easy to register. You register online. That's no problem. Show up, come to the polls, and vote. I want you to vote Democratic. But to be honest, truthful with you, I don't care who you vote for as long as you vote.
We're not partisan, Bill. Don't forget.
I know. Like I said, I don't care who you vote for as long as you vote. When you look at my blog and my post on Facebook, it doesn't say vote Democratic 99% of the time. 99% of the time, I say register, show up, and vote. That's the key part. You got to get registered. In Virginia, the deadline is October the 15th. Get online, register to vote, then show up and vote. That's what we got to do.
How do you get younger people, 18 to whatever age, to understand that it's important to vote? You said you wanted to learn about Spanberger.
Mm-hmm.
Because she's running against Dave Bratt. You know what Dave Bratt is about.
Absolutely.
How do you get young people to have that attitude?
I don't think it's just young people, John. I think it's really all people.
To all the people that don't know, to get it, number one, get registered, then get educated and participate. How do you get them to let me find out about Dave Bratt? What is it that he stands for that I like, that I might not like? What does Miss Spanberger stand for that I like, that I don't like?
You asked what's important to you. The bottom line is what's important. What are the things important? Do you love your grandmother? Does your grandmother need more Social Security money? Or do you you want a better opportunity for jobs? You want better transportation? Okay, I looked at something the other day. Get me. Y'all know we have a Petersburg-Richmond connection here. Right. So last night, I looked at the bus service to Petersburg. And I said to myself, now this is crazy. If you looked at the schedule, You know what time the bus leaves in Richmond going to Petersburg? 4:41. Wait a minute. Who's off work at 4:41 that can catch the bus to Petersburg? Did anybody look at that schedule? I'm going like, okay, so the bus leaves at 4:41 and people get off work at 5 o'clock? So now there's one bus going to Petersburg in the evening at 4:41. So it's simple things like that is. If you want transportation to areas where you can, like out Midlothian and other things like that, you have to first of all get involved, vote for people, and then let them know what the issues are that are important to you. That's what young people need to do.
You mentioned Midlothian, and it's interesting because do you remember a couple of years ago, they had this experiment where they had a shuttle running from Chesterfield to Richmond and back and forth.
Yes.
And the participants said they loved it, absolutely loved it. But the powers that be decided they were going to end it. And I'm thinking, well, if everybody that participated and loved it, why not just keep it going?
Well, a lot of the problem was the same thing I just mentioned about the Petersburg bus. Even though you have a bus going from here to there, what time does the bus go?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? What time is the bus going from here to there? So there are a lot of things that young people need to pay attention to, but you just can't gloss over it. It just can't be something that you just talk about on the surface. You got to dig down. You got to realize who the movers and shakers are, what's going to happen. But the one thing that you got to do, the one thing that we can all do, register, show up, and vote.
All right. And I think that's across the board for everybody.
Yeah.
Not just our young people, young adults, middle-aged, senior citizens. This is your community. Bill, thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing your insight and your passion about politics. We'll be right back. We're going to end the show with a good note, with a great message. Listen up a minute.
I pledge to be the change I want to see in my community. Register and vote.
I pledge to vote in all elections, local, state, and national. Vote.
I pledge to always remember people suffered and died for the right to vote. Vote.
I pledge to always remember we, the people, have the power. Vote.
I pledge to always remember to make a change. Vote.
I pledge to remain in school until I graduate. Register and vote.
I pledge to remain a law-abiding citizen and protect my right to vote.
I pledge to always demonstrate respect for myself and others. Vote.
I pledge to get out the vote.
I took the Get Out the Vote pledge. What about you? Vote.
Take the pledge.
Take the power.